Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has no clue what's going on at the border. A week after the nation was horrified by images of a tent city on the Texas-Mexico border, Mayorkas is admitting a staggering number of the Haitian migrants have been released into the U.S.
Of the 17,400 that weren't deported back or didn't return on their own to Mexico, how many have been released into the U.S.?
They're released on conditions,
yes.
and approximately, I think it's about 10,000 or so, 12,000.
So are we talking about a total of 12,000, or could it be even higher?
It could be even higher. The number that are returned could be even higher.
Oh, Al, but it was a pinky promise, and that is a very, very binding condition. Of course, that was yesterday. Today, guess what? The number's up again.
The number, I think, is a bit above the 10 to 12,000, just to be clear. I might have, I think it's about 13,000.
Like I said, 15, 25, maybe 45. He's like an auctioneer. So what else is Secretary Mayorkas lying about? And how does he still have a job? Here with me to discuss Fox and Friends Weekend co-host and host of the Will Cain podcast. Plenty of college football there. It's Will Cain. Hi, welcome back.
Hey. Hey, good to be here.
He's one of these people who is empty-headed. He's an empty suit. He's a bureaucrat. He's making excuses for the administration. He doesn't tell it to us straight. He's one of those people who goes, oh, bad optics. Let's remove the optics, but not change the situation. Does that do a disservice to the country?
Absolutely, but by design. You choose auctioneer, I choose bad salesman. If you walked into a store and you said, how much is this particular item? I'd like to buy that TV. How much is it? Yeah, that TV's 400, could be 600, 400, 600. I don't know. In the end, it could be 700. I'm not sure. You walk out. This is a bad salesman. But the difference between that imbecilic salesman and our Secretary of the DHS is the Secretary of the DHS probably does know the accurate number and doesn't want to share with us what it might cost, what the numbers might be that have actually been released into the United States. See, I think we've given this administration, Kennedy, not enough credit. It's not being guided by incompetence. It's being guided by design. You can't look at this any longer and simply go, they don't understand incentives. They don't understand that by creating a system that doesn't work, by opening the doors, more people are going to come. No, they do understand. This isn't incompetence. This is by design.
And you have 80,000 people in Panama. Have you heard of the Darien Gap? I was not familiar with this 66-mile stretch of swamp and jungle that has black scorpions, pit vipers, no potable water. This place is less survivable than the Carlton Reserve. And that's where you've got 80,000 people about to make their way through. The U.S. government is putting a lot of pressure on Mexico to continue detaining them. I don't think anyone has a plan. I'm going to be honest with you.
No, and it's more Haitian migrants who've seen the incentive of their brethren being released into the United States. They've seen the deal pay off. Yeah, look, Kennedy, I'm generally fairly adverse to anything that even sounds conspiratorial, but conspiracy theorists have been on a hot run over the last 2 years. You know, Kennedy, we should start listening a little more and thinking a little deeper and thinking that maybe all of this isn't by accident. Maybe it isn't all by incompetence. Here's the thing. If all of these people make their way into the United States, who benefits? If our illegal immigration laws aren't enforced, who benefits? Well, the Democrats seem to believe they will benefit. They will have a fresh voting base. And that we have to look at what's happening and start understanding that they have a long game in mind. You know, I think the plan is actually playing out. You said, I don't know if anybody does have a plan. I think they do, and I think the plan is playing out because they have the laws. Kenny, they have the laws. They don't need Mexico to reinforce these laws. They have Title 42. They could have deported all of these migrants back to Mexico with the Remain in Mexico policy, but they didn't. They scattered them across the United States of America.
Yeah, but there's already a lot of ill will between our government and the Mexican government. And, you know, there are a lot of people who are trying to immigrate legally, and it's very tough to do. The system actually, it does have to be completely reformed because there's not a uniform application of the laws that we have. There's such a patchwork that it is confusing and it is inhumane frankly. And, we don't know who we're giving asylum to. We don't know who we consider a refugee or why. I do think there are a lot of good people who want to come here and they want to work. They want to take care of their families. And, they have been held hostage by horrible governments, whether they're narco-terrorists or worse. And, now
There's a legal path. There's a legal path to immigration in this country.
It is serpentine at best.
Yeah, but there's a legal path, and there's also a legal path for an amnesty application as well if you're asking for refugee status. It doesn't involve, when Alejandro Mayorkas says we have a long tradition of this, we don't have a long tradition of illegal immigration in the pursuit of amnesty. We have a long tradition of accepting refugees like we just did from Afghanistan through a legal process.
Yes, but I'll tell you what, man. They really have to figure out what those processes and what those systems are, because with everything the government does wrong, the people you're screwing over are the very ones who need the most help. So, I understand the massive distrust of the federal government, from immigration to the economy and vaccines. Will Cain, thank you so much.